Hello, my name is Jacob Boyer, and I'm doing an oral history assignment. Today is September 30th, and I'm interviewing Dorian Goldman, my friend. Thank you for being here today. Where and when were you born?
I was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1950 in the summer.
What languages do you speak, and how did you learn them?
Well, I really only speak English. I'm not great at studying and learning languages in school. When I've lived in a country, like I lived in Sweden when I was 17, I was able to learn a little Swedish. But I remember that better than the Swedish I took for 2 years in college afterwards.
Have you ever moved, or did you always live in one place?
No, I was born in Brooklyn, and I lived in Brooklyn till January or half of my kindergarten year. And in the second half of kindergarten, we moved to Port Washington, Long Island.
I never knew you lived in Port Washington once.
Yeah, I did, and that's where I grew up. I went from kindergarten through high school in Port Washington, not far from where your grandmother lived and your dad grew up.
During your childhood, what did you spend your free time doing?
When I was your age, I remember liking sports. I liked volleyball, and I liked softball. I also liked making things. Like I remember making pot holders and selling them to my neighbors and taking orders, asking them what colors they wanted. I was in the Girl Scouts and the Brownies. My grandparents had a summer home that they bought just around the time I was born when they retired in Rockland County, which is right across the Hudson River from here. And they had a big garden, and I used to love to garden with them. It might be the beginning of my loving to garden.
What did your parents do?
My father was a businessman. He invested in real estate and managed real estate, which is buildings in New York City mostly. And my mother was mostly a stay-at-home mother.
Did your family spend time together? If yes, what did they spend most of their time together, and what did they do?
We did spend time together. My father worked in New York, so he commuted, so he came home kind of late. But we usually tried to have dinner together every night. And then on weekends, he really liked, I want to use the word puttering around the house. He liked to do things. So we always helped him. And one of the things he did was garden. Another thing he loved to do was make tomato sauce, pasta sauce on Sunday night. And we were all able to invite as many friends as we wanted to come over. And he would make a great, gigantic pot of tomato sauce, and we'd have spaghetti every Sunday night.
What does puttering mean?
Puttering? He just liked to do little things around the house, fix things, make things look nicer, either garden or... He actually liked to fix things a lot, though I didn't help with the fixing so much. The other thing I remember doing that I really enjoyed doing is sometimes on the weekends, my father, who was busy during the week mostly, would take all of us out to a diner for breakfast on a Saturday or Sunday morning, and that was a lot of fun too.
What new inventions do you remember most during your lifetime?
I was pretty little, maybe 3 or 4 years old, and I remember my parents and my father's parents, my grandparents, buying their first television sets. And I remember the excitement of all the adults of what a big deal this was. And it was a gigantic piece of furniture. The TV was over here, but it was a big wooden piece of furniture that, when it wasn't just the TV set, it came with a big fancy piece of furniture. And it was black and white. And I remember watching that. In fact, they were programs for children. So this is before I was in kindergarten. I remember there was a program called Ding Dong School, and there was a teacher called Miss Francis, and you'd kind of sit and watch, and she would be teaching for little kids. And then there was a magic screen, like a piece of plastic you put on the screen, and you could color along with the teacher. And if you weren't fast enough or you didn't know where your plastic screen was, you'd take out your crayons and you'd scribble right on the TV, and then you get into a lot of trouble. And I remember that.
What was your favorite food growing up?
My favorite food was something my grandmother made. She was born in this, no, she was born in Hungary, but she came here when she was very young. And Hungarians are known to be very good cooks. And she made something that we called nukanak. And it was basically eggs and flour and salt mixed together, and it was a little thick, and you'd cut it off a flat plate into boiling water. So it was kind of like a homemade noodle. And we'd eat it with butter or cottage cheese, and that was my absolute favorite food.
What do you remember most about your school experience?
Basically like learning, and I remember liking most of my teachers. I remember in elementary school we had a parade on Memorial Day, and it was always fun to march in that. And I also remember something that's kind of unusual today. It was in a town, the school, and some kids would go home for lunch. They'd actually walk home for lunch. And those of us who didn't live close enough to walk home were allowed to go off school grounds and buy our lunch at a soda shop nearby. And I remember being able to buy a hamburger and a soda for 35 cents. But that was really only till I was probably in second grade, and then I think they changed those rules.
What type of clothing did you wear as a child?
Similar to what kids wear now, except I think I had to wear skirts to school. And I think if I had gym, I wore shorts under my skirt.
Who did you admire most during your childhood and why?
I remember doing a project on Harriet Tubman, and I really admired her. I really admired my grandmother. She had been a working woman and didn't have much time for her own children because she worked so much. So she had retired when her first grandchild was born, which was me, and I got to spend a lot of time with her, one day a week. And I really had a special relationship with her too. She was really kind, very smart, very creative, and very loving. You know that feeling that how your parents had to discipline you, but my grandmother just loved me no matter what I did. So it was unconditional love, so it was really special.
Seems like you like your grandma a lot.
I did. We had a good relationship.
What was your favorite game or toy as a child?
I like to paint. I like to create things. And I like sports too. I have a game here that I played when I was really little, like 4 years old. That was little pegs that you put in a pegboard, like. But I do remember, I think it was elementary school, playing with dolls a lot. And I used to take the basement over and make houses and whole villages for the dolls.
Wow.
So I do remember that. In fact, one of those dolls I think I still have with all the clothes, making doll clothes and furniture for the dolls. And one of them is called Madame Alexander.
What kind of music did you listen to growing up?
Really liked Motown music. But I think I was a little older by the time I liked that. In middle school, I remember your great uncle being on TV on American Bandstand, which was teenagers dancing on TV. And so that was music like Elvis Presley and that kind of beginning, early rock and roll. I also like show tunes. We used to sing a lot of show music and go to Broadway shows.
Anything else you think I should know about your life and how your life has changed since you were a child?
Well, I think I told you a little bit how much I enjoyed gardening with my grandparents. And my parents, mostly with my father, I had a little garden, but I don't remember that much of that. It was mostly with my grandparents. And I loved their house in Spring Valley. They were in the middle of a big apple orchard. So I guess what's changed in my life is now I have my own garden. And it's something I really love. I love growing vegetables. I have a big vegetable garden. And last year, for the first time in my life, I got chickens. And it's something I always wanted, so that I could collect the eggs and have fresh eggs. Would you like to see the chickens?
Sure.
Well, they're right here behind us. Maybe they'll come over if we bring them
Here's
something.
one of the chicks.
Yeah, we got some new chicks this year. And this has been a great joy for me. This is a big change in my life. It's sort of like having a mini farm. I think I must have always wanted to be a farmer. And so we have some apple trees, and we have honeybees, and that's a big change in my life because I didn't have all that growing up.
Do you have any other information about the time you were a child that you think my classmates and teacher might find interesting?
Well, I think one of the things that's very different from the time you're growing up in is that my father fought in the Second World War. So their generation was just at the end of the war, and I was born 3 years after the war ended. And it was very much on their minds about how the world had been upside down and all the cruelty that had gone on, and also how strong America was. And then as I grew up, the world changed a little bit, and by the time I was in high school, there was another war going on in Vietnam, and the young people were really against it. That was very different. Whereas my parents' generation really believed completely that the leaders were always doing the right things because the American leaders, had won the Second World War. That our generation was a little upset because every night on TV they were showing the number of young people who were dying, and we didn't want this war to go on. So there was a real difference between the two generations, and I think that's very different for your generation. That's going on now. I guess there just started to be a war, but there really hadn't been, and we had been growing up in a pretty peaceful time.
Thank you for letting me interview you. This has been a great time with you. See you next time.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
This
Bye,
has been a big
Gloria.
pleasure. Bye-bye.